Welcome to this week's episode of Insider. I'm Maayan Hoffman, executive editor at ILTV, and I'll be your host. Today is the big day, Election Day in the United States. After much anticipation, millions of Americans are casting their votes. Although the final outcome may take some time to confirm, but regardless of who ultimately wins, today is the right day to revisit each candidate's stance on the key issues that impact both Israel and the United States, two nations bound by a strong and enduring alliance. Joining me to unpack the significance of this election are two distinguished guests, including the one that is tuning in directly from the United States. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Eric Mandel, the founder and director of Middle East Political and Information Network, who has spoken to senior advisors from both campaigns. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
I also have Professor Eytan Gilboa, professor of international communications at Bar-Ilan University, and I would say one of Israel's foremost experts on the U.S. elections. Welcome, Eytan.
Happy to be here.
So let's get started. So maybe not today, or definitely not today, and certainly potentially not tomorrow, but we will have a new U.S. president, let's say within the week. Now, do you see the U.S.-Israel relationship evolving depending on the outcome of the election? Eric, why don't you start with that question?
So there's no doubt that the U.S.-Israel relationship will be on a new path after this election. So let's just break this down to three parts. Part one is if Vice President Harris wins, I believe the 3 months until inauguration in the end of January, President Biden will want to have times being quiet. Second, if Trump wins, who knows what President Biden will be? Will he be the person who said he was a Zionist and maybe want to do something for his legacy as a Zionist, maybe actually be part of something to take care of Iran's nuclear program? Or will he be like President Obama, who did UN Security Council Resolution 2334, which said that all Israeli presence over the Green Line is illegal? Part two is that the new administration will have to deal with how Israel is dealing with Iran, how Israel is dealing with Lebanon, how Israel is dealing with Gaza. For example, Israel wants a buffer zone of 1 kilometer around Gaza, taking over territory. That will not sit well with the Harris administration. And the third part here is how to judge this future U.S.-Israel relationship is based upon who the advisors will be. And the advisors with a President Harris are going to be somewhat problematic. If you have a Chris Murphy, a critic of Israel as Secretary of State, or Philip Gordon, National Security Advisor or Secretary of State, these are people who have been highly critical of Israel, have bent over backwards for engagement with Iran. If Trump wins, again, who will he choose? Will he go with the Pompeo wing, which was very strongly pro-Israel, or will he go with the isolationist wing? Will people like Senator Rand Paul have his ear?
It's very interesting. I mean, now here in Israel, public opinion about the candidates is actually very different than it is in the United States, although, of course, most Israelis cannot vote. But that being said, the vast majority, according to all polls, of Israelis are actually supporting Donald Trump. I'm curious, Eytan, from your perspective, do you think that that's justified? Is Trump really that much better for the state of Israel?
Yes. First of all, 2/3 of Israelis think that Trump is going to be better to Israel. This assessment is simply based on the first term, on Trump's first term, and very good relations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So Netanyahu is still the Prime Minister of Israel, and if Trump is elected, then Israelis expect Trump to be a friend of Israel, similar to the way he had been during his first term. But we know from history and theory of presidential elections and behavior that a president in a second term is very different from a first term, especially in this case where Trump lost the 2020 elections, and now he's coming back in 2024. Many things have happened, both in the United States and Israel. And so I think that the expectation that the golden age of the first term is going to repeat itself, but I'm not sure this is going to be the case. It depends much about how Trump is going to assess the threats in the Middle East and in Israel. He said, like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that the war in Gaza and the other one in Lebanon must end.
Right, and there was
So
even some
we have a
leaks, I think, Eytan, I read somewhere that he even said it needed to end by the time he would be inaugurated if he were to be elected, which would be by January 20th, meaning our war could be over in just a couple of months. But, I know the polls are very, very close, and it's unclear who is really going to go to the White House. But, Eric, do you agree with the Israelis? Do you think that there is a candidate, Trump, that is better for Israel and also, more importantly, as an American, for the United States?
Well, I just wanted to comment one thing about the IDI poll. Interestingly enough, unlike in America, where young people are more liberal, in Israel, it seems the other way around. 90%, I read the poll last night, it was 90% of young Israelis are in favor of Trump, and it was something like 3 or 4% for Harris. And Americans don't understand, in the generation that's grown up in the post-Second Intifada era, different Israelis are than, because we project our Western American ways on how we expect Israelis to behave. So first of all, I work on both sides of the aisle. So I'll be careful of what I say. What is the most important thing for America is unity. Israelis can certainly relate to that with the dysfunction that happened obviously before October 7th and judicial reform. Who will bring unity is the most important thing. I don't think it's going to happen with Harris or with Trump. But most Americans are going to judge this election not by foreign policy issues. They're going to judge it by pocketbook issues, economy, inflation, abortion, things that Israelis don't care about. Israelis don't care about domestic issues. So it's going to be in the eyes of the beholder who is the better candidate. But they are certainly two very different candidates in their views, both domestically and in foreign policy.
Do you have an idea, Eric, about who is going to win? I know the polls I said are close, but do you have any intuition there?
I was talking with a former AIPAC president about this the other day. If you had to ask, everybody uses the word a coin flip. And if you would have asked me a week ago, I would have said Trump. I think it is maybe leaning a little bit to Harris. Nobody really knows. I've seen a number of things that have been put into play in battleground states, like Georgia wasn't in play, North Carolina wasn't in play. And because those battleground states are now in play, which may have not been battleground states, there might be a path for Vice President Harris to win without winning Pennsylvania, right? But the assumption has been that the vice president has to win Pennsylvania or she will lose, and certainly also Michigan and Wisconsin. But there seems to be more fluidity. There was even what they consider an outlier poll in a place like Iowa that's strongly Republican or red, showing Harris making it very competitive or actually leading. So again, I hope the end of the night or very soon is that we have a clear winner. That's the best thing for America, that we do not have a contested election, but I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, and certainly based on what happened last year. Eytan, I want to turn back to you because I actually want to think a little bit about what happens here in Israel. Based on the stances or the policies of each of these two candidates, do you feel that one or the other is going to have a better or worse impact on us with regards to how we handle the situation with Iran, which seems to be continually heating up?
Yes, U.S. relations depend on what the new administration is going to do, but also on the Israeli government. And there's much debate inside Israel about what to do both in Gaza, in Lebanon, and Iran, which is the head of the snake. We don't know yet how the Israeli government is going to approach a new American administration. It seems that although this time Netanyahu has declined or refrained from intervening directly in the presidential elections, Netanyahu certainly favors Trump as much as most of the Israeli public. And if Kamala Harris is elected, I think that we should expect more tension and disagreements with the United States about the Palestinians, the West Bank, Gaza, and Lebanon. It would take some time for a Harris administration to develop and formulate policies. But I think Israel should prepare itself in case of Kamala Harris winning, prepare itself a plan how to deal with all kinds of constraints that she is going to be under, primarily pressure coming from the progressive branch of the Democratic Party, which President Joe Biden completely ignored. But this time, if Kamala Harris is elected, and obviously she would be interested in re-election in 2028, she will depend on some accommodation of the progressive progressive branch, part of which is very hostile to Israel, part of which is very anti-Semitic, and this could be a major challenge to the Israeli government.
But Eytan, Trump has also been very vocal about reducing U.S. foreign aid, and I'm wondering what impact that could have on, Israel's defense cooperations with Israel. He has got more of an isolationist attitude, and I understand that we could see some reduced defense spending.
Yes, there is much concern in Israel about turning inside the United States, and this would be true for both Trump and Harris. The feeling is that maybe the United States is going into some kind of a limited isolation, type of isolation. In terms of military aid, this long war, demonstrated clearly the complete Israeli dependency on American supply, even of munition. The progressive part, to go back to that, opposed, or at time, opposed U.S. supply of weapons to Israel. There were several calls to halt or condition that supply of arms. The United States and Israel signed a foreign aid agreement, a very good agreement, back in 2016. It went into effect in 2018. It should last until 2028. The agreement had been for 10 years, but implementation of the agreement is done annually. Congress has to approve aid every year, and so today there are also elections to Congress, and Israel hopes that the results in the House of Representatives as well as in the Senate would be favorable to the continuation of substantial military aid and cooperation between the United States and Israel.
Now, Eric, you're a member of the American Jewish community yourself. I do want you to respond to Eytan. Please go ahead. And I also want you to answer just a question in terms of the impact of the American Jewish community on the election afterwards, if you can, because I've been reading a lot about the potential impacts of the 2 or 3% in some of the key swing states, like Pennsylvania, for example.
I just want to comment about the memorandum of understanding. I think Israelis should realize that the next president probably is signing the last MOU. Wow. I had a long discussion in the spring with one of President Trump's likely senior advisors, who thinks that all aid should be cut to Israel, not necessarily not supportive of Israel. I had to convince him that a transition should occur in the next time. So the aid, and maybe it's for a healthier relationship if Israel does not take that. But what the professor said is very true. Israel is so dependent upon the United States, it needs to be looking at other supply chains for future wars. As far as American Jews, because this is so close in some battleground states like Pennsylvania, 10 or 20,000 votes could swing the election just in a place like Pennsylvania. What we hope is, what I think is very different than in the past, American Jews, vast majority secular, until October 7th occurred, didn't think anti-Semitism was a problem in this country, and Israel was not a primary issue. After October 7th, American Jews started to realize that Israel may be in an existential fight, and they do care about Israel. and that anti-Semitism swept up right into their doors to their children on campuses. So I hope whoever the next American president is going to realize that the American Jewish community is the most vulnerable minority community in the United States. And the way to answer that will be to codify what anti-Semitism is in relation to Zionism. And if it is not, and the State Department had me speak to one of our embassies about it when President Biden came out with his anti-Semitism initiative back in 2023. If they don't codify it, saying that anti-Semitism and if you are that if you say Israel has no right to exist, that is not anti-Semitism, which is basically with the left wing that the professor was talking about is not anti-Semitism, then American Jews are going to remain incredibly vulnerable. And this is changed how American Jews are going to vote, and they are going to make a difference. People forget Michigan, Pennsylvania, this place is Arizona. There's a good amount of American Jews who will make a big difference in this election, but their priorities have now changed because of that.
So, I mean, Eric, one of the priorities when we talk about priorities that President Trump had in his previous administration was, of course, the signing of the Abraham Accords. We were able to sign with 3 different countries, and Saudi Arabia is supposedly on the table. But on the other hand, as Eytan pointed out, the stance of President Trump might change. He might be looking more inward this time, and the foreign policy will shift. So do you believe that we can still get a Saudi Arabia peace deal with either president, with one or the other? What do we think is going to happen there?
Well, I think one of the things is that, remember, President Trump had an outside-in strategy, which I think actually was the better strategy, which meant prioritizing Israel's relationships with the greater Arab and Muslim world. What the Harris administration and the Democratic Party look at is that the Gordian knot to untie is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They don't realize if that's solved, so much of the problems we worry about in the Arab and Muslim world would still be there. I think both administrations would want it, but it's going to depend upon what America gives Saudi Arabia. And if Saudi Arabia views America as a reliable ally. So what would America have to give? We should remind ourselves that they wanted a civilian nuclear program, the ability to enrich uranium. They wanted a defense pact equivalent to what we have with South Korea and Japan. And I think if there's a President Trump and he wants that, I think the Democrats are going to fight it. I think if President Harris would have that, I believe the isolationists in the Republican wing will have it. So I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing, but I do believe it is. Remember, this is not about shared values. This is about shared interests, and the interests of the greater Arab world are staying with a first world high-tech Israel, who is still and should remain for American interests, America's best friend in the Middle East.
So now we're going to run out of time, but I do want each of you to be able to give some kind of final sentiments. First of all, Eytan, what should American voters watching the show understand about the 2 candidates when they head to the ballot boxes today, especially if they care about Israel? What are your thoughts on that, if you can just keep it to 1 minute?
This is a very tough question. If I had been an American citizen with the right to vote, I would have much difficulty in deciding whom to support. I think there are good things and bad things about each candidate. I think that Israel has to identify those good advantages that each brings to the administration. I think the number one challenge is Iran. The successive American administrations failed to deal with Iran's manipulations and uses of violence across the Middle East. Biden and Obama used diplomacy. President Trump used sanctions. Both failed to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. And Iran is today close as ever to become a nuclear power. So the true supporters of Israel have to think who is going to be the best president to confront Iran in a way that would prevent it from becoming a nuclear power.
And Eric, we're really running out of time. So in 30 seconds, I want you to answer the same question. You yourself, an American heading to the ballot box, tell the people who care about Israel what they should be thinking about today.
I think if they believe a candidate realizes, just as the professor said, that Iran is the head of the octopus, as Naftali Bennett said, that is where that's the address of what you want to do if you want to stabilize the Middle East. That is what you need to do. I don't know if either candidate realizes that maybe the most important thing to do is for America to be pro-Iranian. That means pro-Iranian people, to have regime change. The Middle East will be a much better place. Israel will be safer. The Abraham Accords can occur, or whatever it evolves past them. So it's reminding people that Iran is the major problem, not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That will only be helped by first dealing with Iran.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you both so much for your analysis. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have this evening. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.